Hello everyone. So in this today's very short lecture, we are going to learn about the deltas. In this component of delta formation, we will learn what are the concept of delta, means what is this delta, how and why they are formed at different places and of various shapes. Then we will discover what are the favorable conditions which are necessary for the formation of such deltas. And the fourth thing that we will learn in detail, that is what are the various types of delta, especially on the basis of the shape, they can be classified into many types. We will learn about them with the help of examples. So let's start with this first component, that is the formation of delta. Now the first thing comes here in the mind, that is what is a delta. Now, if you know something about the river flows with three stages. One is youthful, the second is mature, and the third is the old stage. And now what happens is, in the youthful, then it is the mature, and then it is the old stage or the snail stage. Now river's speed decreases significantly with each this stage. So in the youth stage, the river will have a maximum speed, and therefore it will have maximum erosive capacity. So here generally you will see most of the features will be of erosional nature. Here in the mature stage, the main work of the river becomes transportation of the load, and in the third stage, most of the depositional features you will see. Why? Because the speed is decreasing continuously, and because of this depositional work you will see the delta formation. Now what is delta and how exactly the name delta comes in? Now it was Herodotus. He saw this depositional feature of the, let's say, some sediments were there, especially in the Nile River region. When he was visiting this area, he saw a kind of triangular shape was there. The sediments were deposited by the Nile River in such a manner a triangle was formed, and therefore he gave this name as delta, right? Now, for example, now this is a river. Let's assume this is a river. It brings so much of the sedimentation load. The sediments will come, and let's assume this is nothing but the boundary from where oceans are starting or the seas are starting. Now what happens is, the load or the sediments which are being transported by the river, they will enter into the ocean, and now what happens is a kind of depositional feature will be formed at the mouth of river here, and if it is triangular in shape, most often you will see it will be triangular. Therefore it was given the name as delta, as I gave you the example from this Nile, as it was seen by Mr. Herodotus. Okay, so this is how the deltas are formed. Now the condition is, the river is lacking the energy, both in its competence as well as its capacity is reducing significantly in the last stage, and therefore this river will be unable to wash away its sediments. And therefore what happens, if it is unable to wash away its sediments in the last stage, these sediments will start depositing in its bank area only. Yes, so now see here the process you will understand clearly. So let's assume this is the river. It is bringing so much of the sediments, and here what happens is its capacity and competence both are very low. Okay, now because of this factor, it is unable to wash away its sediments, and the sediments are getting deposited here. So river has no other option but to change its path. Why? Because this area has been clogged by the sediments because of its deposition. Now river is changing its path. Again, its path may be blocked and clogged by the sediments. The river will be forced to take another path. This can be blocked, this can be blocked, and in this repeated process, what happens is, every time it is the load of sediments which is blocking the path of the river, and therefore river will be distributed into many distributaries, right? So now what happens is, this was the main river. It is going to be distributed now into several branches. Why? Because of, again, repeated clogging by its own sediments. So it is changing, it is continuously seeking new path so that it can flow. Okay, so this is how, because of this inability, or we can say inability of the river to wash away its sediments, the delta-like features are going to be formed at the last stage, where the river is meeting the sea or the ocean. Okay, now the now the concept is, how many type of the deltas are there? First we will go into that one. Most often you will see, based on the shape, you will see most of the time arc shape or semicircular shape or kind of circular shape also you can say can be formed by the sediments. Now see here, if I connect these dots, this seems like a kind of arc or arcuate or a semicircle, right? So this type of delta, which is here, it is often known as arcuate delta. It is also known as lobate delta, or it is also known as arc shape delta. Okay, arc shape delta. Various names are there. Now we'll understand how this type of delta will be formed, especially on the basis of the shape we are giving the name arc shape. Most often, this type of delta will be formed in the semi-arid regions. For example, if I give you the example, if we take the example of Ganga and Brahmaputra delta, it is formed in the West Bengal area, in that Bay of Bengal area. So this is the classic example of arcuate delta, and it is formed in the semi-arid region. Most often you will see. Now here, what happens is, some conditions are required for the formation of such delta. What are these conditions? The first condition is, the river is bringing slightly coarser deposition. Okay, so sediments which are coming or being transported by the river, they are considerably, we can say, they are not finer, they are rather coarser. The second thing is, we are assuming the density of the river water, it is comparable to the density of the oceanic water. Okay, so what happens is, in broad language, if I'll tell you, with this density, what will happen? The density of the river water, if it is matching to the density of the oceanic water, what will happen? They both are denser, they both are heavier. Okay. Now, what happens is, considering these two conditions, keep these two conditions in mind. Now, what happens is, let's assume this part, that dotted part that you can see from this, let's say, dotted part, in the left we have the continent, and in the right we have the oceanic part. Okay, now what happens is, a river, I am assuming a river which is flowing sluggishly, or it has very low speed, or it's flowing very slow. This is the third condition that you will assume. It is sluggish and not faster in terms of its water movement or water flowing. Now what happens is, this sluggish river, it is bringing the coarser sediments. Now what happens is, the moment it enters into the oceanic water, because oceanic water is denser as well as the river water is equally denser, now what happens is, both waters will meet here, and therefore the clogging will start, the sedimentation will start. Those sediments which were transported by the river, because they are heavier, because they are coarser, and the river is having very less speed, therefore what happens, the deposition will start right from here onwards. Means the moment river is entering into the ocean, the deposition is starting. Yes. Now, because of that, what happens is, because of again the repeated clogging, the river is dividing its path. It is seeking new path every time. And because of this, you can see all the way deposition is being there, and therefore you will see this type of the shape of delta can be formed here. So this shape is nothing but is known as the lobate type of delta, arcuate type of the delta, arc type of the delta, and it is the most common type of the delta formation. If I give you the examples where which rivers are making this type of the delta, the first example is Nile River. We do have our own Ganga Brahmaputra delta. Then we have the Yellow River, which is flowing through this China, that also makes the same type of arcuate delta. So these are the examples, and based on the shape, you can see here this type of the shape is known as arcuate shape, or arcuate type of the deltas are formed. This is one type of the delta. Okay. Here, what is important? The important is these conditions. If these conditions are meeting, often you will see this type of the delta is going to be formed. Now, the another type of delta comes in. These are the various names of the same delta. Okay. The second type of delta is very famous bird foot delta. Often the second name of this delta is also finger shaped delta. Now, again, some conditions should be there in this type of delta formation also. So what are the conditions? We are assuming, number one, the river is flowing swiftly. Okay, somewhat speed is there with the water. The second condition, we will assume the sediments are finer. Remember, in the previous case, sediments were coarser, and here the sediments are finer, and the river's water density water density is much lesser than the density of oceanic water. These are the again 3 conditions that you should remember. Now what happens is the water, which is the river water, is comparatively lighter and the river is moving fastly and swiftly. Now again, take this example. Here it is the continent side. Okay, from the dotted line, this is continental side. The second side here, it is oceanic side. Now what happens is the river is moving swiftly here. Now it is having the sediments of finer shape. Therefore, what happens is with this speed, river brings these sediments to the, let's say, this much of the depth inside the sea. Now what happens is why this much of the depth was possible? Because the river was faster. The second is the sediments were finer and river's density of the water is much lesser than density of the ocean. Therefore, it is penetrating right up to here. Now what happens is now the sediments which are very finer, they are interacting with the saline water, oceanic saline water, and therefore they will start depositing along this channel or along this path. Okay? Now, because of this sedimentation, what you will see, very surprisingly, you will see a kind of linear segments of the delta formation will be visible from here onwards. Okay? Now, these linear segments that you can see, they are resembling nothing but fingers of a human being, or you can say fingers of the bird. So, if you see, this is the kind of shape. Okay? The conditions are again very important. These conditions are very necessary to make this type of the delta. The another thing is you should remember the river is entering up to some length inside the ocean. Why? Because of again the same 3 conditions. Okay. Now because of this linear segments, a kind of bird foot delta will be formed. And the classic example of such type of delta where you can find it is in the Gulf of Mexico, where you will see the river Mississippi forms this type of delta. Okay, so this is the classical example of bird foot delta, right? Now the another type of delta is the next delta is, it is known as estuarine delta. We can also call this delta as a truncated delta. However, this you can also separate down. This can be given as 4th number, but more or less they are same. Now see here, what happens is, what is estuary first? You should know what is estuary. Estuary is the mouth of the river where river is opening in the ocean or the sea under the sea water. Okay, means its mouth is submerged under sea water or the oceanic water. Now what happens is, in such circumstances, now consider this is a river and I am taking the example, let's say this is the western side of India, and here you must be familiar with this river, that is Narmada and Tapi. Okay, they both make estuary here while they are opening inside this area. In this area, they are making estuaries, means their mouths are submerged under the oceanic water. Now what happens is, the river, that is I am taking the example as, let's say Narmada. Some sediments are being brought by this Narmada river, but here this is the oceanic water which is very turbulent, and because of this estuary, what happens is these sediments are not allowed to get deposited here in this area. Why? Because of oceanic water, as it is in the circulation, again and again wash away these sediments. So what happens is, there is a struggle which is going on in the work of river, that is nothing but depositional work, and the river is meeting this challenge where the oceanic water is continuously doing this erosional work. Okay, so this struggle between erosional and depositional work is continuously going on in this area. However, sometime river may succeed, and in that case, river succeed means depositional work will succeed, and in such cases, deposition will start. Narrow and long, elongated type of delta will be formed here in this area, and this type of delta, which is longer, elongated, and narrower, this type of delta is known as estuarine delta. Why? Because it is being formed in the regions of estuary. Okay. Now, what is the concept of truncated delta? Right? Truncated means when it is the delta which is often dissected or disturbed by the oceanic water or by the sea water. Now you can see clearly here what is the oceanic water doing here. It is continuously dissecting, eroding this delta. Yes or no? Yes. And therefore I said more or less estuarine delta or the truncated delta are same. However, you can write this as a third example. This is the fourth example. Okay? The fourth type, and the various examples of such type of deltas. Number one, Narmada River. Second, in the India, we can say in the Tapi River, right? So these are the example of estuarine delta. So four deltas we have learned. The fifth delta now, it is known as blocked delta. Blocked delta. Now what happens is, let's say this is the boundary. This side we have the continent. And the second side of this dotted line, it is ocean. Now what happens is, often you will see any river which brings sediments. Let's say this is the river. It is bringing sediments. These sediments will be deposited continuously towards the sea. So here you will see the delta type of shape will be formed. This process where the delta is growing towards the sea, so this process of delta's growth towards the sea is known as progradation. Progradation. Now what happens is, if I say the process of progradation has been stopped by some reason, this reason could be, number one, the oceanic water is not allowing this deposition to occur, means because of its erosional work, continuously it is removing the sediments. So what will happen? Progradation will not occur. The second thing could be the sediment supply from the river itself has been blocked or has been reduced, and therefore no more sediments are coming here. Therefore, no more progradation work will be done by the river. That is the second possibility. And the third possibility can be this river may change its course. And before, let's say, this changing of the course, it was making delta here, but now it is making the delta in some another area. So this could be the third reason behind this progradation. So this type of the deltas where the progradation itself has been blocked, this type of the deltas are then known as blocked delta. The classical example of this blocked deltas, you can see here the example is number one, the delta which is formed by Yellow River in China, or it is also known as Huanghe River. Huanghe River of China. So earlier, let's say it was going and it was draining its water and making a delta in this Yellow Sea. Okay, but nowadays it has changed its course and it is entering into Gulf of Bohai. So the new delta is being formed here in Gulf of Bohai, whereas the earlier delta has been blocked here, and therefore we have seen this is nothing but the example of blocked delta. Okay, so that is the classical example where the river course has changed, and it is the reason behind this blocked delta formation. In case of India's example, if you want to see, so let me erase this area. In case of India's example, if you will see the Bay of Bengal, here the Ganga will be divided into Hooghly. So see here, there is a point when you will see on the map, this is known as Faraka point. From this Faraka point onwards, before this Faraka point, it is a river Ganga. After this Faraka point, Ganga will be divided into distributaries. So Padma, Meghna, yes. So here it will become Meghna in the Bangladesh, and Hooghly from the Calcutta, it will move out. And after, let's say, coming out from Bangladesh, a whole this area is nothing but a 400 kilometer wide delta is formed in this area. Okay, so this is nothing but our Hooghly, and here we have Meghna, and in this side of Hooghly, that is the western side of the Hooghly, this delta has been now stopped, or progradation of this part of Ganga Brahmaputra delta has been completely blocked. So in the blocked delta, we can also give the example that is the western part, that is western part of the Hooghly can be the example of blocked delta. Okay, so these are the various type of the deltas that we have learned. The last part of this short lecture is what are the favorable conditions for the delta formation. Now see here, one by one we will try to learn. Number one, Conditions for the formations we are learning. Number one, the river length. So obviously, if length of the river will be shorter, then what will happen? It will bring lesser sediments, which is not required. We need more sediments, right? So the river length must be longer. For example, we can say Himalayan rivers are therefore making the great deltas. The example, Ganga Brahmaputra Delta. Yes. The second is size of the sediments. Now, size of sediments means they should not be much finer. If they would be finer, what will happen? They will be carried inside the ocean for greater lengths, and therefore good deltas will not be formed. If they are too coarser, then what will happen? They will not be carried by the river even to the ocean side. Okay? They will be deposited right before. Therefore, we need medium size of the sediments, not coarser and not even finer. The third thing is, if something like we can say the cycle of erosion of the river has been, let's say, regenerated, or we can say longer is the length of cycle of erosion of river, means its length of erosion where the river is cutting across various terrain is much, let's say, larger. The fourth thing is topography through which the river flows. Now, for example, if you will say the Ganga river is flowing, much of its length is coming from the plains, right? Plains are nothing but sedimentary rock, which are very vulnerable to erosion. Therefore, what happens? The plain are getting eroded very easily, and hence great size of the sediments are making great deltas in the Ganga Brahmaputra region. Yes. In the Bay of Bengal region. Yes. So the topography, if it is the plain topography, the plains are there, or we can say the sedimentary rocks are there, it is much more favorable, right? Fifth condition is, see here now, fifth condition is we need a stable sea coast. A stable sea coast. What is the meaning of a stable sea coast? Means it should not be tectonically active. What will happen otherwise? For example, the river is jumping from here, it is bringing some sediments, and these sediments are getting deposited here, and the delta formation was started. Now, because of the tectonic activity, what could happen? What can happen? This area may be disrupted, may be disturbed, and therefore the delta formation will be completely disrupted or will be affected. Therefore, we need stable sea coast. The next thing is we also need low, we can say, sea level. So sea level where the river is entering, it should be towards the lower side. For example, if I give you the two example, let's say this is the one case number one, where you can see this much is the depth of the continental shelf here. Okay? This is the water table or the sea water level. The second case is, this is the second case where the sea level is here, and this is the continental shelf area, or we can say the part of continental margin. Now, where the delta formation is very easy, the delta formation will be easy here. Why? Because of deposition of the sediments, easily the delta will be formed here. However, because of this deep area, what happens is it will take more time for the delta to form. Okay? So we need lower side of this sea level, right? Next factor is we should not have any interruption. Let's say, what is kind of interruption? Interruption in the flow of river. In the flow of river. For example, there should be no dam or lake in the flow of river. Otherwise, what will happen? In this dam or in this lake, much of the sediment load will be dropped, and therefore delta formation will become very difficult. For example, if we see, let's say this is the western side and here it is the eastern side of India. If you will see some of the rivers, here many tanks and dams are there. So because of this tanks and dams, what will happen? The sediments will be dropped in this tank or the reservoir, and therefore the delta formation will be affected here in this area. So river should not have this type of interruptions in their path. that would be more favorable condition. There are some more conditions. For example, let's say what is the type of rocks there, what is the type of rainfall patterns there. So these are the various conditions which are required for the formation of delta. I hope these all the concepts were helpful for your understanding. Thank you very much. We will meet in the next concept.